Sometimes, the greatest heroes are the ones no one sees. On a cold, dark street corner, a young boy named Kofi tries to survive another night. He has no parents, no home, not even shoes on his feet. Each day, he wakes up to the same struggle, searching for scraps of food, begging for coins, or doing little chores just to make it through. He had nothing, no roof, no comfort, no security. But there was one thing he carried inside him: hope and the will to survive. Tonight, as you listen to his story, you'll see how one poor, homeless boy, with nothing to his name, made a choice that would change not only his life, but the life of a powerful family. And what he did next shocked everyone. Stay with us until the end, because this story holds a lesson about kindness, courage, and how fate can turn a life around in the most unexpected way. Welcome to Pure African Tales, where real stories inspire real hearts. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and share this video so more people can experience these unforgettable journeys. There are places in the world where being invisible is worse than being seen. Kofi knew this feeling all too well. He walked the busy streets, yet no one noticed him. And when they did, it was not with kindness. Some days, people would pass by as if he didn't exist. Their eyes looked right through him, as though a boy like him had no right to stand in their world. Other days, it was far worse. Shopkeepers shouted at him, accusing him of stealing when all he had done was stand near their stalls. Market women chased him away with sticks, afraid his empty stomach might lead him to their baskets of bread or fruit. Children from nearby homes laughed at his ragged clothes. They mocked his tangled hair, his bare feet, and the way hunger made his hands tremble. For them, he was entertainment, a reminder of what they never wanted to become. But for Kofi, each laugh cut deeper than hunger ever could. He found little corners under bridges or old abandoned sheds to sleep. The nights were cold, and sometimes the rain poured down so hard it felt like the sky itself was punishing him. Kofi curled himself tightly, clutching his thin shirt, whispering prayers that tomorrow would be kinder. But tomorrow was often the same. Insults instead of greetings, fear instead of trust, silence instead of love. Yet, even in this harsh world, Kofi carried a secret. Deep inside his young heart lived a dream. He dreamed of a day when he would have more than scraps to eat, when he would wear clothes that were not torn, when he would walk proudly through the streets without people calling him a thief. Sometimes, he imagined himself sitting in a classroom, holding a book, writing his name on a piece of paper. Sometimes, he imagined himself eating at a table with a family who cared for him. But those dreams always felt so far away, like stars he could see, but never touch. Still, Kofi refused to let the cruelty of the world destroy the little hope inside him. Every day, he told himself, one day, life will change. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when. But deep down, he believed his story wasn't meant to end on these streets. It was late that night. The streets were quiet, and the lamps flickered weakly against the darkness. Kofi lay curled under a broken wooden bench, trying to ignore the sharp growl of hunger inside his stomach. Then it happened. A sound so sudden, so violent, it tore through the silence. The screech of tires, followed by a loud crash. The sound of metal twisting, glass breaking, and then silence. Kofi jumped up, his heart racing. He looked around. Just a few meters away, near the corner of the street, he saw a dark shape on the ground. He ran closer, and what he found froze him in place. An old man lay on the cold pavement, his body twisted in pain. His clothes were torn, and blood trickled from his head. The man's chest rose and fell in weak, broken breaths. His lips trembled as he tried to call out, but no words came. Kofi looked around, hoping someone else would help. But the truth was harder than the crash itself. People were there, some peeking from the shadows, others walking quickly by. Yet no one stopped. Some shook their heads, whispering, "It's not our problem." Others looked away, pretending they didn't see. Fear gripped the crowd. What if the police blamed them? What if helping meant trouble? So they chose the easier path, turning their backs on a dying man. But Kofi couldn't move away. His small body trembled. His mind screamed at him to run like the others. He was just a boy with nothing. No food, no money, no strength. What could he possibly do? And yet, something inside him spoke louder than fear. A voice that said, "If I leave him, he will die. And if I stay, maybe I can help." His hands shook as he knelt beside the old man, filled with pain, but also relief that someone had not abandoned him. Kofi whispered softly, "Don't worry. I'm here. I won't leave you." The boy tore a piece of cloth from his own ragged shirt and pressed it against the man's bleeding wound. His fingers pressed down, clumsy but determined. He called out to strangers, begging for water, for help, but they kept walking. Kofi didn't stop. He lifted the man's hand, held it tightly, and whispered words of comfort. He didn't know if the man could hear, but he spoke anyway. "You will be okay. Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Minutes felt like hours. The night grew colder, the road emptier, but the boy refused to let go. And in that moment, a truth revealed itself. Everyone else had turned away, but the boy who had nothing was the only one willing to give everything he had: his courage, his strength, and his heart. The old man's breathing grew weaker, his chest rising and falling like a candle flame about to go out. Kofi knew time was running out. He looked around. Still, no one had stepped forward. The street was filled with shadows, whispers, and retreating footsteps. And so, with nothing but his small strength, Kofi made a choice. He slipped his thin arms under the man's body, straining as he tried to lift him. The man was heavy, far heavier than the boy had ever carried. His knees buckled, his arms trembled, but Kofi gritted his teeth. Step by step, he dragged the old man away from the road, away from the danger of passing cars. The ground tore at his bare feet. His shoulders burned with pain. Yet he did not stop. When his strength faltered, he pulled instead of lifting, inch by inch across the cold pavement. The man groaned in pain, but Kofi whispered, "Hold on. Please, just hold on." Finally, they reached the safety of the sidewalk. The boy laid the man down gently, breathing hard, sweat and tears mixing on his face. He quickly looked at the man's wounds. Blood stained the old man's clothes, flowing too fast. Kofi tore another strip from his own ragged shirt and pressed it firmly against the wound. His small hands tried to stop the bleeding, but the red kept seeping through. His chest tightened with fear. Was he too late? Still, he did not give up. He pressed harder, whispering prayers under his breath. Not the prayers of someone taught in churches, but the raw, desperate words of a boy who had known pain and did not want another to feel it. Minutes dragged by. The silence of the street was broken only by the sound of Kofi's heavy breathing and the faint groans of the old man. Then, in the distance, a faint siren began to rise. Relief washed over Kofi. He waved his arms wildly, shouting for help as the ambulance drew closer. When the flashing lights appeared, the boy felt his knees weaken, but he refused to let go of the wound until help arrived. The paramedics rushed out, their gloved hands taking over, moving faster and more skillfully than Kofi ever could. Yet as they worked, one of them looked at the boy with quiet astonishment. A homeless child had done what no grown man in that street dared to do. As they placed the old man on the stretcher, his weak eyes fluttered open. His lips trembled, and with what little strength he had, he whispered, "Why help me?" Kofi leaned closer, his voice barely more than a whisper, but strong with conviction. Because no one else would. The man's eyes glistened. A faint smile crossed his lips before he drifted back into unconsciousness. And at that moment, the truth was clear. Kofi, a boy with no home, no food, no family, had more humanity in his heart than all the strangers who walked past, combined. The ambulance doors closed, the siren wailed again, and as the vehicle sped away, Kofi stood alone on the street. His shirt torn, his hands stained with blood, but his spirit burning brighter than ever. He didn't know it yet, but the man he had just saved would change his life forever. The flashing lights of the ambulance faded into the distance, but Kofi kept running after it until his legs could carry him no more. His chest burned, his feet raw against the rough ground, but something inside him refused to stop. He had promised the old man to hold on, and even though he was just a poor boy, he felt bound to that promise. By the time he reached the hospital, the sun was beginning to rise. The streets were quieter, but Kofi's heart was louder than ever, thumping hard in his chest. He stopped at the gates, unsure if he even belonged there. His clothes were torn, his hands still stained with blood, and his face streaked with sweat and dust. To everyone passing by, he looked like nothing more than a homeless beggar. But inside those hospital walls, the life of the old man he saved now hung outside, too afraid to walk in. He hugged his knees tightly, trying to make himself small. A guard walked by and frowned at him. "Go away, boy," he muttered. But Kofi stayed, his eyes fixed on the doors, waiting for any sign, any news. Time moved painfully slow. Every time a nurse walked out, Kofi straightened, only to shrink back again when they passed without noticing him. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten since the day before. Yet hunger no longer mattered. Fear had taken its place. What if the man died? Would they blame him? Would they say it was his fault? He imagined the angry voices of villagers, the harsh accusations he had known all his life. His hands trembled as he buried his face in them. Hours slipped by, until finally, 2 doctors walked out, their white coats bright in the morning light. Kofi lifted his head, his heart racing. He couldn't bring himself to speak, but his wide eyes said everything. Is he alive? The doctors exchanged glances, surprised to still see the boy waiting. One of them sighed and crouched down in front of him. "You're the one who found him." Kofi nodded slowly, his throat too dry for words. The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you saved his life." The boy blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. The doctor continued. "If you hadn't stopped the bleeding, he wouldn't have lasted until we reached the hospital. What you did, it kept him alive." Kofi's mouth fell open. Relief washed over him like cool rain after a long drought. His chest rose and fell as he let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. For the first time in so long, someone wasn't chasing him away, calling him a thief or mocking him for being poor. Instead, they were thanking him. He sat silently, tears glistening in his eyes. His hands, still trembling, rested on his knees. In that moment, Kofi wasn't just a homeless boy anymore. He was the reason an old man still breathed. But little did he know, that man's survival would lead to truths and revelations far greater than anything he could imagine. The hospital corridor smelled faintly of medicine and disinfectant, but to Kofi, it was the smell of uncertainty. He sat quietly on the bench, his head lowered, hoping no one would notice him. Hours had passed since the doctors took the old man inside, and though they had told him the man survived, the boy still felt uneasy. Then, a sudden stir broke the silence. 2 black SUVs, screeched to a stop outside the hospital. Men in dark suits stepped out, their sharp movements and commanding voices drawing attention immediately. They weren't ordinary visitors. These were bodyguards. Kofi's heart skipped. He shrank into the bench, trying to make himself invisible. The men walked briskly into the ward, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Nurses pointed them toward a private room. The boy watched, confusion filling his eyes. Who was this old man he had carried off the street? A few minutes later, whispers spread like wildfire among the staff. "It's Chief Mensah," someone murmured. "The father of Kwame Mensah, the billionaire." The words struck Kofi like thunder. Chief Mensah? The name was known across the nation. He was more than an elder. He was the father of one of the most powerful and wealthiest men alive. And he, Kofi, the poor street boy, had saved him. His pulse quickened. He glanced toward the exit. What business did someone like him have here, in the midst of such powerful people? Surely they would think he had only helped to gain something. Or worse, accuse him of causing the accident. Slowly, he rose from the bench and began to edge toward the doors, his steps soft, his eyes darting nervously. If he could just slip out, no one would notice. But before he reached the door, a firm voice carried through the corridor, weak, yet commanding. "Where is the boy?" Kofi froze. The voice came from the hospital room. The old man. Chief Mensah was awake. A nurse tried to calm him, but the old man persisted. "The boy who pulled me from the road. Bring him here. Now." The bodyguards frowned, their suspicious eyes sweeping the hallway. Finally, one of them noticed Kofi, half hidden in the shadows, thin and trembling. They exchanged glances, then gestured toward him. "Is it him?" one asked. Kofi's breath caught. He wanted to deny it, to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The old man's voice came again, louder this time. "Yes, that's him. Bring the boy to me." Two guards approached, and for a moment Kofi braced himself, expecting harsh words or rough hands. Instead, they simply guided him toward the room. He hesitated at the threshold, his eyes wide, his body stiff. Inside, Chief Mensah lay propped up against white pillows, his face pale, but his eyes sharp with recognition. Despite the tubes and bandages, there was strength motioning Kofi closer. "Don't be afraid," he whispered, his voice cracked but steady. "You are the reason I'm still alive." Kofi swallowed hard, his throat dry. For a boy who had been ignored all his life, to suddenly be wanted by a man of such stature felt unreal. The billionaire's security and hospital staff looked on in silence, puzzled at the sight. The nation's most respected elder, reaching out not to a minister, not to a wealthy donor, but to a ragged street boy. And as Kofi stood there, inches from Chief Mensah's bedside, the weight of the moment sank in. He had tried to disappear into the shadows, but destiny had pulled him into the light. The hospital room was quiet, the hum of machines the only sound filling the air. Chief Mensah shifted slightly, his frail hand still reaching out to Kofi. The boy stood awkwardly at the bedside, unsure whether to move closer or retreat. Finally, the old man broke the silence. His voice, though weak, carried weight. "Tell me, boy, who are you?" Kofi hesitated. For most of his life, no one had ever truly asked. Who cared about the story of a barefoot child on the streets? He lowered his eyes, his hands fidgeting nervously. I don't have anyone," he murmured. "My parents died when I was little. No brothers, no sisters. I sleep wherever I can, under bridges, by the market stalls. I do small jobs, clean shoes, carry baskets, beg when I must." The room fell still. Even the billionaire's bodyguards, men trained to keep their emotions locked away, shifted uncomfortably. The boy's words carried the weight of survival, of nights cold and hungry, of days filled with scorn. Kofi continued, his voice trembling but steady. "Sometimes people give me bread. Sometimes they chase me. They call me names. Thief. Useless. Street rat. I never answer back, because they might be right. I've never had anything." His small shoulders shook, but he pressed on. "But last night, when I saw you bleeding on the road, I couldn't walk away. I thought, if I do nothing, you will die. And I know what it feels like when nobody helps." The old man's eyes glistened, moisture gathering at the edges. He studied the boy carefully, each word piercing deeper than the last. Finally, Chief Mensa's lips parted, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You saved me when the whole world turned its back." The words stunned everyone in the room. For decades, Chief Mensa had been known as a man of influence and authority, rarely showing vulnerability. Yet here he was, declaring gratitude to a ragged boy in torn clothes. Kofi swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. To him, helping had been instinct, not heroism. "I only did what I hoped someone would do for me," he whispered. The old man reached for Kofi's hand, his frail fingers wrapping around the boy's dirty, calloused ones. The touch was gentle, almost fatherly. "You gave me something no money could buy," he said slowly. "Compassion." The boy's chest tightened, warmth spreading through him. For the first time, someone had looked past his rags and seen his heart. Outside the door, nurses whispered, amazed. One of the guards leaned closer to another and muttered, "This boy. He is not ordinary. Perhaps God sent him here." Chief Mensa didn't release his grip. His gaze stayed fixed on Kofi. "You have lived your whole life with nothing, and still, you gave everything. That is the mark of greatness, my son." Kofi's eyes widened at the last words. "My son." It was the first time anyone had ever spoken to him like family. He blinked rapidly, fighting the tears threatening to fall. And as he stood there, holding the hand of the man he had saved, the boy felt something stir inside him. Something he had never known before. Not fear, not hunger, but belonging. The door to the hospital room burst open with force. Heavy footsteps echoed across the floor. It was Mr. Kwame, one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, his tailored suit slightly disheveled from rushing. His eyes scanned the room in panic until they landed on the frail figure of his father, Chief Mensa, lying on the bed. "Father," he exclaimed, his voice trembling. For a moment, the strong The next morning, the hospital felt calmer. Chief Mensa was resting peacefully, but his words from the night before still echoed in the air. "This boy saved my life. Treat him as family." Mr. Kwame stood in silence, staring at the small figure sitting in the corner of the waiting area. Kofi's clothes were still torn, his face still dusty from the streets. Yet his eyes carried something different. A quiet strength, the courage of someone who had nothing but still gave everything. Kwame walked over slowly. For the first time in his life, the billionaire bent down to the level of a homeless boy. His voice was softer than anyone had ever heard cared, he said. "I cannot let you go back to the streets." Kofi hesitated, unsure if this was a trick. People had mocked him before, promised him things, then pushed him away. But Kwame's tone was steady, and his father's words had already built a bridge of trust. Kwame reached into his pocket and handed him a small card. "From today," he said, "you will never beg again. You will eat with us, you will wear decent clothes, and you will go to school." Kofi's eyes widened. School? For years he had watched other children carrying books, laughing in uniforms, walking to classrooms he could never enter. He had dreamed of learning, but dreams were cruel to the poor. And now, in a single moment, the impossible was being offered to him. Kwame continued, his voice filled with resolve. Food and clothes are simple. Shelter is easy. But the greatest gift you deserve is knowledge. With it, you can change your life forever. The boy's hands shook as he clutched the card. He had no words, only tears. And in that silence, the narrator's voice rises. He had no riches, no power, no name, only kindness. But sometimes, kindness opens doors no gold can buy. Years passed, and the boy who once slept on cold pavements was no longer a shadow on the streets. Kofi grew into a man, strong, educated, and full of purpose. He walked with dignity, not because of wealth, but because of the lessons hardship had carved into his soul. Where once he begged for scraps, now he offered food to others. Where once he was mocked, now people sought his guidance. Chief Mensah's words had been true. He became part of their family. Yet, he never forgot the alleys where he once shivered, nor the children who still wandered those same paths. Kofi made it his mission to help them, to be the hand he once needed, but never found. And so, the boy who had nothing built a life filled with compassion. He proved that kindness, even when you have nothing, can change everything. The final words echo. That night, he saved a dying man. But in truth, he saved himself. And now, dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others. Spread the message of hope, and let kindness live on. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Pure African Tales, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another inspiring true story.